is the time. Apologies for being late. The time is 7:05 PM. The parking lot is full, and this is a meeting of the Mad River Valley Planning District, April 17th, 2025. The second item on the agenda is a question. Are there any adjustments to the agenda? Hearing none. The third item on the agenda is public comment. Do we have any public comment, Perry?
No. I don't have any comment.
Nope. Okay. The next item on the agenda is the acceptance of the minutes from the March 20th, 2025 MRVPD steering committee meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
The meetings are accepted. The next item on the agenda is the staff report. Joshua and Sam.
Awesome.
Please.
Thanks, everybody. Happy April. I'll say the last meeting we had in this place, it was just light enough that it wasn't dark outside, and now it's coming quick. So it's spring day for sure. There's 10 pages in this month's staff report, chock full of a bunch of things. I'm just gonna hit a couple highlights and go from there. This is not the version that I thought I had, but anyway, I'll shoot from the hip. I'm not sure where my notes are. So the Waitsfield Community Wastewater Project, I wanted to highlight that we've been spending a lot of time on that project. It's nearing 60% design. So 60% design drawings we're anticipating by mid-May. And there's a lot of work happening on the design side, a lot happening on the permitting side, specifically VTrans, and getting VTrans concurrence and identifying concerns that VTrans may have with the identified wastewater conveyance pipe, and it's within the right of way. There was our engineer met with a VTrans representative the town's engineer, met with a VTrans individual and did a drive-through for an entire day last week to identify those things, and those things will be incorporated into the design, double check to make sure they're okay with VTrans, and that's what will be including that 60%. So just giving an example of some of the permitting process that's ongoing. There's archaeology and historic resources, which we're awaiting response from historic preservation folks on that work. But all that is important to get that feedback, because that will then go into an environmental information document, which is a required piece of the project, and builds into things like a 106 historic preservation review. But in addition, there's a lot happening on the funding front. There was a grant application submitted to the Vermont Community Development Program, which is Housing and Urban Development federal funding that was submitted last Friday. And we are in the process. There's a $1 million grant request for construction of the project, and there's another $1 million grant request for construction happening currently. The deadline is tomorrow through the Northern Border Regional Commission, a Catalyst grant program. Support from Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission and others. But we submitted for each of those are two separate federal grant programs. And both had pre-applications that were due back in February, March, and we moved to the invitation to apply for each of them. So bottom line is we're really busy working on getting all those pieces of the puzzle together, and we'll have that application submitted tomorrow. Staff in the planning district working primarily with York Haverkamp, the town administrator in Waitsfield, and JB Weir, the planning and zoning administrator, on that, but with a handful of other folks helping as well. What other things that I want to highlight? I literally made a version of this and highlighted things, and now I can't find that version in front of me. There are a lot of different grant programs and that have been announced, as well as I'd say nearly a ton of different opportunities for trainings, workshops, webinars, things of that sort listed by category in the application. One thing I do want to mention, there is, V-Trans puts out an annual document about funding and identifying a variety of different funding opportunities. And the one for 2025 was released in January, and it's linked in the in the staff report. It is called the V-Trans Show Me the Money Guide. And it's really great. So I just want to bring that to folks' attention. I've highlighted a couple. Sam and I've highlighted a couple of different things that are within that we thought could be of interest. Things like there's a wildlife crossing pilot program, thinking about the work in Warren and wildlife crossing work. And there's a variety of projects between 200,000 and 25 million are encouraged. I've never seen that high of a range. And then the Federal Highway Administration Bridge Investment Program as well. So those are things that I've heard in some of our discussions, folks have highlighted. And honestly, there's so much in here. If folks have any questions or anything you wanted to talk about or learn more, Sam and I are happy to answer any questions.
Okay, so hearing no questions, the next item on the agenda is the annual organizational meeting. Which Joshua is, how do you suggest we proceed here? Is this to vote for the executive committee primarily?
Yeah, so I'm just gonna throw it up on the screen and I'm not gonna put it through Zoom because we're all here. Successfully did over there without it sliding back the other way. So I just want to highlight the Plain District adopted bylaws last summer, August 15, 2024. The bylaws do a couple different things. A lot of the things that are included in the bylaws are identified in the Articles of Agreement and other documents, but we try to clarify where there might be lack of clarity in those documents and identify additional procedures. But included in this is the membership and representation, and specifically, I'm gonna go to page 3, section 3. So there's voting, resignation, attendance, and organization. So section 401 speaks to membership, and then 402 is officers. So members of the steering committee are appointed annually so they're 1-year terms and after town meeting from the municipal side. And so in April, assuming that it might take some time in the month of March, in April is the organizational meeting. We have the officers of the planning district consist of a chair, a vice chair, and a secretary treasurer position, so really 3 positions to be appointed by the steering committee. And that officer shall be elected at the annual organizational meeting, which shall be the first meeting of the MRVPD steering committee in April or as soon as practical thereafter. So this, I shared a link or a copy of this in the meeting packet, but I just wanted to highlight sort of these are the different roles to be voted on at this time. In 2024, the chair was Brian Shoup, the representative from the Waitsfield Select Board. The vice chair was Daniel Raddock from Warren Planning Commission, and then Chuck Martell as the secretary treasurer. So those are the 3 existing or current positions. Brian is no longer the representative from the Waitsfield Select Board. Welcome, Dave. That doesn't mean you become the chair, but we have a vacancy. And so I just wanted to sort of highlight that, see if there are any questions, and see if what their interest there may be, or if there's a slate recommendation.
I mean, we do have a proposed slate. I mean, I think Brian, it's too bad. I think Brian did a great job as chair. The thought would be that Chuck would continue as treasurer. Jonathan is willing to step in as vice chair. And I thought I'd step up as chair as sort of the proposed slate. You know, this is my last year on the Warren PC, so it would be sort of a 1-year chair. So Chuck, Jonathan, myself, but if people have other ideas, or somebody else wants to raise their hand, that's great too.
And it's also worth noting that the officers constitute the executive committee. And 403, the next section speaks about the executive committee, what it does. Essentially, it meets usually a week beforehand and works with staff and addresses things. Doesn't make decisions. The decisions are made by the steering committee. But that's one of the things that one of the responsibilities of the officers is to sit on the executive committee. And that was something that was clarified in these here bylaws.
And I think that to echo what Josh was saying, one of the great benefits of the bylaws is that it really does, when I joined MRBPD, I got a little frustrated with what's the executive committee doing versus what the steering committee is doing. And I think we resolved that, and that all key decisions should be made at the steering committee level. So I think that's, I feel like that issue has been put to bed pretty well. I guess we should have a vote. I didn't hear anyone else make any comments on a slate. Do I have a motion to accept the slate? That would be Chuck as treasurer, Jonathan as vice chair, and myself as chair.
I'll move to accept the slate.
We have a second? Are all of us conflicted out? Are we all looking at Dave? Are we all looking at Dave to say?
Second.
All right. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, the ayes have it. So that is our new slate, our new and continuing slate. Anything else on the organizational meeting, Joshua?
Nope, that was the only piece.
Okay, well, moving right along. Item number 1. I think that should be seven, but well, is new business. 2024 Sugar Bush
Yeah.
Be Better Here report. Joel Rhodes, Sugar Bush.
All right. Hi, yeah, my name's Joel Rhodes. Work in planning at Sugar Bush, environmental compliance and sustainability. Also a Waitsfield resident. I'll pass around some of the printed reports. So you have something physical if you'd like to look and share with those around you. Yeah, so just the planning department normally comes in the summer to present our annual data report. And we cover a little bit of what is now kind of captured in our first inaugural Sugar Bush Be Better Here report. So just this came out in February, 68-page booklet on how Sugar Bush is supporting the community, our work in sustainability and protecting the planet, and what we're doing for our people. This was, I actually want to take a step. Oh, I should share my screen.
You should have the ability.
Yep. One. Expand that. Minimized. There we go. Just wanted to take a step back and share kind of one of the inspiration pieces for this is well, actually, we've been talking about it internally for a while of putting out kind of an annual impact report. Alterra Mountain Company, our parent company, they actually just last week put out their 2024 annual impact report forward stance. And this was really kind of the inspiration and kind of set us up with a nice model for Sugar Bush sharing specifically what we're doing in this work as well. So this is 172 pages, so I'm not going to go through all of it, but just want to hit a couple highlights of also the larger mountain community that Sugar Bush Resort is also a part of, and yeah, provides additional support for the work in community, planet, and people. And I just wanted to highlight Jared Smith, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Alterra Mountain Company. A quote that just stood out for me in the letter, kind of as a reasoning behind all of this, is we've always believed that the mountains are for everyone, and with that comes a responsibility to sustain them for future generations. Now more than ever, this commitment drives us forward, keeping the mountains vibrant hubs of adventure, connection, and thriving communities. And it's just, I also find it working for this company, inspiring to see, in the current political climate that, our parent company is continuing to lean in, and prioritizing, people, planet, community, and responsibility. So, I'm not going to spend much more time on this, but it is available on Altera Mountain Company's website. They've got a whole forward stance page highlighting efforts throughout the entire enterprise. Sugarbush has some great shout outs there as well. But I'll switch over to our report. So yeah, like I said, this was the first annual report. Calling it the Be Better Here report after our Be Better Here motto. And now it's kind of the umbrella for our social responsibility and sustainability initiatives. This also can be found on our social responsibility Be Better Here page. So 2024, this is our fiscal year. So for Altera and Sugarbush, our fiscal year runs from August through the end of July. So this would actually looking back August 2023 through July 2024. So this isn't capturing our most recent season. So some of the data in here is a little older at this point, but is really just mostly focused on the fiscal year. But being our first, we did kind of take a look back at where we've come. So broken out into community, planet, and people. Have a letter from our president, John Hammond, at the beginning. And again, just a quick quote that kind of, stands out as a driving force behind this. We're ski area operators, but we're also its caretakers. And with that comes a responsibility to our community, to the planet, and the people interested or already involved in the sport we love. Yeah, just want to cover a couple highlights that may be of interest to this group. Starting with community and some of the highlights here in the community. One of the reasons we wanted to publish this report is to better highlight our philanthropy, how we're supporting community organizations. So highlighting here, a lot of local organizations that many of you are probably familiar with, or maybe even involved in. And for the 2024 fiscal year, in both cash and in-kind donations, 1.85 million, which, over the last couple, we've really been better tracking our community contributions just over the last few years. But from FY23, it was a 13% increase over the prior year. So, as our business continues to grow, so does our community support. Having this, Be Better Here report also just continues to inspire, additional fundraising and outreach, outpour with recent flooding. We highlight some of our partnerships. Again, lots of local community organizations, High Fives, Mad River Path, Mad River Valley Arts, Kelly Brush Foundation. Our school programs continue to expand, working with the schools in the Harwood School Districts, working with over 1,700 students, and providing opportunities for community members to access the slopes and a free and affordable way. Yeah, I'm not gonna cover everything here. I do encourage you to, has anyone taken a look at this report before today? Yeah. Okay, so it is new to a lot of you. Okay.
You did email.
Yeah.
Email to us this week, which was helpful.
And that's your copy, so you can hold on to it. Yeah, and so then the third major bucket, planet sustainability. So again, being our first report, we wanted to really kind of just highlight, our sustainability progression and journey, featuring our major energy reductions, our electrification or shift from fossil fuels to cleaner electricity, energy efficiency, our habitat restoration, and the work that we've done in GAD and Rice Brooks, and some of the recognition we've received at the state level, and then also the National Ski Area Association. We've won Golden Eagle Award for climate impact as well. And as I've mentioned in our MOU data report, we had last year, we have a goal, 2030 goal. We actually set this before becoming part of the Alterra Mountain Company, which now has the same goal. It aligns, it's science-based, inspired by the Paris Agreement, a 50% reduction in greenhouse gases by 2030. Since FY 2019, we've already reduced emissions by 2022. And so looking at pathways forward in vehicles and how we're heating our buildings to continue to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. Highlighting our clean energy, our work with Green Mountain Power, and elevating our solar production throughout the state. Almost half of our electricity is offset by solar net metering. Highlighting our community partnership with the Mad Bus. Talking about our water conservation efforts, our water and wastewater utilities, our waste diversion from the landfill, our recycling, composting efforts continue to trend upward, and over 45% diversion rate from the landfill. Lincoln Peak is on Forest Service lands, and we work regularly with Agency of Natural Resources and Forest and Habitat protection and improvement. Mention our Safety Environment Wellness Committee and the work with local conservation commissions on the Mad River Valley Bear Initiative. Snowmaking is a big part of our sustainability story. Over the last just 10 plus years, we've reduced our electricity usage by 30%, or 4 million kilowatt hours, which also opens the door to using less, electricity and lower demand for snowmaking. How can we continue to, electrify our operations? So our snowmaking team has really done a lot of work. I mentioned our work with the National Ski Area Association, Sustainable Slopes program, and they have a Sustainable Slopes badge program where you can apply, and when you meet certain criteria, then ski areas are recognized for their work. And so these are the badges that Sugarbush has earned. Again, continuing to highlight, particularly our local neighboring organizations, Friends of the Mad River, Catamount Trail, Green Mountain Club, that have trails that cross Sugarbush property. I mentioned the Safety Environment Wellness Committee, and then the third bucket, again, people. We're committed to supporting the progression of a community where individuals from all backgrounds feel comfortable working, whether they're employees or guests, exploring all that Sugarbush has to offer. Sugarbush recently, in the last few years, has developed a belonging committee made up of various employees to help with our inclusion initiatives. This just a couple weeks ago hosted our third annual Pride Weekend, and that event continues to grow. Also hosting workshops with the Pride Center of Vermont to continue to educate staff and build that culture of inclusion. Share Winter is a big partner with Sugarbush and Alterra Mountain Company. Here locally, we partner with the Association of Africans Living in Vermont. And in FY 2024, over 30 youth were able to come to Sugarbush at no cost, free tickets, free lessons, a meal, rentals, so that they could have access to winter recreation in a way that they wouldn't otherwise. So really awesome program. Alterra also launched a Forward Stance art studio And so maybe you've seen the moose, so the story behind Bulla Ace, is talked about there. Vermont Adaptive, got a spot at Mount Ellen, and work there continues to grow year over year. And yeah, safety, we won a National Ski Area Association Best Guest Safety Program in FY 2024. Our risk and safety manager does a lot of great work. Not only guest, but employee safety. And they also do outreach in NSA Safety Month in January to local schools, and Patrol goes and does outreach to local schools. Altera also has organized employee resource groups, and at Sugarbush, we have participation in most of these 4 ERGs, employee resource groups. The Multicultural Matrix for BIPOC individuals, Resource Alliance for disabilities, the Pride ERG, and then a women's group, Women Summit Seekers. And so, yeah, those are the highlights of the report. We plan on putting out our FY 2025 report sooner, actually ahead of Community Day in October is our goal this year. And yeah, so any questions, any comments? Yeah.
Can I ask one, Joel? Many of the state ski resorts are on state forest land, right?
Yeah.
But you guys are on.
We're not
national-
on state,
you're
yeah.
National. forest
yeah.
land. And I'm wondering, do you see, I mean, early days out of Washington, but are you seeing any changes or that might impact Sugarbush coming out of Washington?
Yeah, I mean, we work closely with US Forest Service employees in the Green Mountain National Forest. And I personally haven't seen any, major directives or changes from them. I don't know, Jim, if you have any additional insight there. But
Yeah, the latest one was they asked us to take down a poster that they provided, stating DE&I inclusion. So, I mean, that type of stuff is coming from the National Forest Service.
Okay.
So they provided us a poster last year that we were supposed to hang in all our employee lockers rooms, and they asked us to take it down. And we didn't. So,
And the Green Mountain, it's the Green Mountain and Finger Lakes National
yes,
Forest.
yes.
They have been doing an annual gathering in the Green Mountain National Forest area every year, and there was one planned for this year, but it's been postponed or canceled. There's also a monthly report of activity that they've provided that they used to send out to folks, and they're not sending it out anymore. It's on the website, and I think that the way it was explained had to do with staffing. And then I couldn't connect any of the links, and the website was broken, and it ended up being like 9 emails with the poor person at the where they're strapped for time, just trying to get information. So I'm noticing it on the sort of information access side.
we haven't seen any staff reductions or, our main contact.
Yeah.
Which is great.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Joel?
I'd like to just point out, as far as, energy savings and waste reduction and all those metrics that we look at, we were one of the best in Altera's portfolio. And, even so far, they give us these goals, and like, we're already so far ahead of that, having a 30% ahead of where we are now, or 40 or whatever they're asking for is gonna be difficult for us to get to, but Joel does a fantastic job. And I guess what I'm saying is we're already way ahead of the curve at Sugarbush than a lot of the other resorts, especially like, say, West Virginia, that's fueling their lifts with coal and that sort of thing. But
Yeah, I mean, it certainly helps again where we're located, Green Mountain Power, our work with Efficiency Vermont, we're always working with them on projects, and we're just, Vermont, we are better positions to be a leader in sustainability. But the greenhouse gas emissions goals are aggressive, and there's a lot of work that ahead of us to meet those goals. And I'd just also like to give a shout out, in putting this together. our John Blay, our communications manager, really kind of behind the philanthropy and community portion, and then kind of an all hands with marketing. Corinne, our marketing coordinator, did really spent a lot of time, making this look great. So there's a lot of time into it, and many people involved, and it's highlighting the work at Sugarbush, which is all employees. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to
It looks
share.
really great, like the layout and the information.
Gorgeous.
Yeah, it's a really,
And like I said, Altera gave us a good a good format to kind of go off of, and Lawson's also puts out a social responsibility report, and it's great to be in good company with good community businesses and organizations. So, yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Moving on to the next item on the agenda then. It is the Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission's Land Use Policy Update. Christian Meyer from the CVRPC is here with us tonight.
Hi, thank you. Christian Meyer, I'm the Director of Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission, ex officio board member, or committee member, steering committee. So I'm going to be presenting, is this going to work? Let's try. I'm going to be presenting on some of the major policy changes we're working through at the region right now, and really try to focus on the nexus of where it's going to impact your municipal plans. Yeah, where you want to. There you go. Drum roll. So I'm going to be going through 4 major topic areas: the future land use area maps, which are a old requirement with a new name, rebranded under the 2024 Act 181. There's always been a requirement for future land use maps at both the local and regional level, but now there's a little more weight to it. Weight that specifically will impact Act 250 requirements, known as the Act 250 tiers. The Community Investment Program, which you all may know as the downtown program, or the state designation program, designated villages, designated downtowns, etc. And finally, housing targets. So to jump right into those future land use areas, I've broken the 10 land use areas out by, I don't know, I've grouped them. The purple ones are all linked to the higher density areas, they're the more urban areas, and they're all linked to other programs. They reach out into other areas. The blue in the middle are kind of in the middle. There's nothing that really changes. Yes, they describe what we're planning for underneath them, but there's no other programs linked to them yet. And finally, the rural areas where there are no programs linked to them, asterisks. We'll get to that when we talk about tiers. There's some conservation elements that are where guidance hasn't been created yet. So moving right down, these future land use areas are dictated really by statute. The statute has been interpreted through a methodology that was put together by the RPCs in an effort to, well, under statute we had to do it, but also in an effort to help give the new land use review board a foundation from which they can ultimately build their review and approval process off of, because all of this now goes through the land use review board, which was formerly the Natural Resource Board, which reviewed Act 250 permits previously. So providing consistent statewide land uses. Oops, wrong button. Excuse me. There we go.
Christian, when you say all of this goes through these new boards.
I'm talking about.
You'll explain what all this is?
Yes, I will.
Okay, great.
I'm talking about the future land use area maps that the regions are producing. We now have to get our future land use map approved the same way municipalities have always gotten their plans approved through their RPC. It's basically applying the same standards to the RPC that municipalities have, which is a bit of a change because it used to be the only people who approved our plan were our 23 municipalities. So now we're more beholden to the state, more ingrained into that state system and less independent to a degree, if you want to throw maybe a negative spin on it. Right, so you have this baseline methodology and requirements that come out of statute, but there is still a lot of flexibility around local, where we draw the lines locally to include local planning goals. Because we've moved this process, I'm getting a little ahead of myself because I'm talking in some ways about the Act 250 approval process, because we've moved these levers closer to home, we have more local input. We map them at the regional scale. We want to, wherever possible, make sure they're consistent with local plans. The way the methodology was developed, it recommends starting in our cores and building and the purple areas and building out through the blue and into the green areas from my earlier graphic. In practice, the way we're doing it is we mapped all the important natural resources, and now we're mapping all the important urban areas, and we'll kind of meet in the middle rather than go in one direction. So getting right to the main areas, the ones that are going to have the most impact, the downtown centers. These are similar to our downtowns, mixed use, residential, traditional historic centers. You need to have at least one per region. We may have multiple in the central Vermont region. Often include all those previously designated areas. You have a designated village here in Waitsfield. We have a designated new development area, neighborhood development area. More recently, those all get grandfathered in. And the downtown centers are going to be tier 1 and tier B eligible. Come back to that. Because a town has a center, whether it's a village center or a downtown center, doesn't mean you're defaulted into tier 1B, which I'll get to. You will have to ask for that, opt into tier 1B, and then apply for tier 1A. You need to have a approved municipal plan. You need to have permanent zoning and subdivision bylaws. You need to have municipal staff and officials who can support the development and a review of zoning. That's a key one, because a lot of towns might have zoning, might not have subdivision, or they have zoning and subdivision, but 2 days a week staff to maintain it. Those municipalities aren't going to be able to take advantage of some of those Act 250 exemptions down the road, because the idea is that we're saying, here we don't need Act 250, we have local regs. So the local governing body needs to show that they have the capacity. For the downtown centers and village centers, water, wastewater is not a requirement. If it's excluded for whatever reason, you'll see in some of the other areas, it is required, but for whatever reason, this is how it figured out. The next is village centers, really the same story, but thinking on a different geography. So I won't go through all the details here. Except that really we're thinking more like a tier 1B status now, not 1A. And again, it's a complicated system because there really are 3 streams. You kind of have to talk about them all at the same time. So you have to pick somewhere to start and end. So I apologize for that lack of fluidity, but it'll all come together at the end. I promise. Okay, then we've moved out of the centers. And now we're talking about the areas. We have the planned growth area. This is where, for those areas that really want to pour a lot of energy and really turn up the heat on new development, maybe hundreds of new housing units, not tens of new housing units. Similar goals though to the previous. So we're looking at high density planning goals with mixed uses, commercial, residential, civic. They need to have multimodal transportation options with active transport, walking, biking, as well as traditional single occupancy vehicles. Transit's also a requirement. So looking at the requirements associated with planned growth areas. Again, municipal plan indicating areas intended for higher density, residential and mixed use development, permanent zoning and subdivision, water supply, wastewater infrastructure within walking distance of a downtown, village center, new town center or growth area, provides housing for a diversity of social and economic group, and conforms with the complete street policies. Basically, we're taking this area, the future growth area, and saying we want it to become a downtown center in the future. That's what we're planning for, but it might be a green field now. Or something similar. Village areas are, I think they just threw this one in to be extra confusing because we have village centers and village areas. Village areas are again more of that growth area, less existing development and looking more towards the future. They are not eligible for tier 1A as we will show in a second. So the only other area I wanted to jump in this conversation was the resource-based recreation area, because obviously that's a big part of the valley's land use planning. No incentives tied to this land use area at this time. It can have high priority conservation areas mixed in, but obviously the defining characteristic is that recreational use. So here it's probably going to be ski mountains. Other parts of the state might be lakeshore. It's these kind of areas could conceivably even be areas with dense mountain biking. Thinking of the Kingdom area. Process considerations. So this kind of is important to outline how we flow through these systems, how we're going to adopt these systems, and where their opportunities are for input. So they're created, as I said earlier, they're created as part of this regional planning process. We're in the midst of updating our regional plan to accommodate this. We expect to have a plan adopted by March 2026. So, and I mentioned the methodology as a foundational starting point, but then they're really built in coordination with our municipalities. So I know some of you are on planning commissions. Will be coming out to each and every one of your planning commissions to really look at our draft maps once they're complete and say, hey, what did we get right? What did we totally miss here? How do we make what the data is showing us line up with what your local planning shows? Again, you have to show capacity to enter into that tier 1A, tier 1B phase, downtown and village centers growth areas, but basically the big four at the top, are going to be required to accommodate a substantial majority, that's the statutory language, of our housing targets, which is my last slide, so I'll get there too. Future land, and then there's some smaller things like if you guys do a local update to your plan and it changes our map, it doesn't mean we necessarily have to go update our map. We can have some minor administrative adjustments.
Can I ask one clarifying question? This does include neighborhood development areas?
Yeah.
Okay.
They will not be called that anymore, but yes, it does. They will be grandfathered into the program. So the tiered framework, tier 1A, areas with capacity for growth, full Act 250 exemption, transitions Act 250 jurisdiction for planned growth areas to municipalities with administrative capacity. So I think that's really key because it's not for everyone. Looking at our region, some towns definitely are lined up to make that jump to that tier 1A. Thinking of a Montpelier, probably a Barry, maybe a Waterbury. Some are more aspirational, but are probably going to go for it, like Berlin around the hospital. But most of our high growth areas would really fall into the tier 1B. So the tier 1B, the big exemption there is developments less than 50 units would be free of Act 250, which is a big deal for most of our communities. And all of this has obviously been pushed along with the need to address the housing issue, which is so front of mind in the legislature. But the big thing about tier 1B is the opt-in. We would, talk with you about how should Warren be mapped. I can pass around our old future land use map just as a reference, but how should it be mapped? And maybe it comes out as a planned growth, or maybe it comes out as a village center. That doesn't mean you're automatically a tier 1B. You still have to self-certify that you have all the requirements, that you have the capacity, and that you're able to maintain the level of review that the state expects in the absence of a state review or state permit. It's not all that you're not reviewing for the same thing. You're just showing that there is a robust review process, which I think can be tricky to fully wrap our heads around until it's actually in place. Tier 2, everything that's not tier 1 and tier 3, easy, moving on. Tier 3, so this is an area that we don't have the information on, we don't have the rules yet. And we don't dictate the mapping on this. This is out of RPC hands. We don't know to what degree our maps will be taken into consideration, but these are the conservation areas. So a good corollary to today would be to look at any development over 2,500 feet automatically triggers Act 250. Well, these would be additional areas like that, the land use review board, through consultation with A&R decides that these are high priority areas, whether it's, tier 1 wetlands. I can only guess at what the requirements will be, but these are those areas that will automatically by default trigger Act 250 review. And this is part of the trade-off, like, we'll give you this a little more leeway in your urban areas, but in trade, we're gonna have a little more control over the high value conservation areas.
And
So,
so,
yeah, go
when
ahead.
you said over 2,500 feet, meaning like up a mountain?
Elevation.
Elevation.
Yeah. That's the current, or that was the previous rule under Act 250, and that would still be in place, because in tier 2, basically status quo. 9 units or 9 subdivision or 9 or more, Act 250. Nothing really changes besides potentially the road rule if that lasts long enough to be implemented. I don't have the details on the road rule. It basically says if you build a long road, you're gonna trigger Act 250. It's 800 feet, but don't quote me.
And just to be clear, residential hamlets are in that second tier?
Yeah. Most of those, unless they could be a village area if they're looking to grow and say, hey, a 25 unit subdivision in this village actually kind of makes sense. We have a civic building, we have maybe good access, maybe the bus comes through every now and again, thinking of Route 2 up towards St. Johnsbury. Maybe we do East Montpelier Village, for example. Maybe East Montpelier Village does want to attract a little more growth. They haven't indicated that, but just trying to think of a place that is currently more like a hamlet, but could have aspirations to grow bigger.
Yeah,
So
if my recollection is correct, the previous regional plan identified East Warden as a hamlet.
Yeah,
for
yeah,
instance.
hamlets still exist. Here you have this is sort of the matrix of the future land use areas against the tiers. Obviously a lot of question marks over in tier 3, but at least you get the tier 1A and tier 1B areas. And those are gonna be the important ones you're really gonna be considering about your villages and where you're thinking about accommodating new housing. If you want to pursue other incentives. All right, designations. So designations, we previously had 5 or 7 designations: village center, downtown center, new growth center designations, new town center designations, all sorts of designations. Now we're just gonna have 2. It's gonna be centers and neighborhoods. Centers are your downtowns, your villages and centers, downtown and village centers, excuse me. Your neighborhoods are your planned growth areas and your village areas. The expectation is that all existing designations will flow into one of these areas. So for example, if you have don't know your designations. Well, I don't think this analogy works really well in the valley, but Roxbury over the hill, that's a village, has a village designation now. They're not going to go after a tier 1B, but they'll probably still be a village center, right? So they wouldn't opt into that second phase. But that's how they'll maintain their center designation. Then there's steps. So then you can add extra benefits by adding additional layers of planning, like zoning and subdivision regs, to get more benefits through the designation program, which is now called Community Investment Program. Luckily, I didn't know a lot of the names before, so it's all.
These are gonna be a test.
Yes, I guess.
Josh, well, that's what, listen, we were warned to think of the neighborhood designation,
Yeah, neighborhood development area,
neighborhood development.
which is still eligible, and there are certain benefits related to an NDA. Because it will be grandfathered in, there are other benefits in the program, the way it has been, that have now been usurped by this new program.
Yeah.
But my advice, and based on the conversation talking to the state individual running that program, said if these are the benefits you want, which I believe they are the ones that
Yeah.
you do, then it does make sense to move forward with that.
Yeah, you can, definitely. Otherwise, you'll basically. So I'm passing out this map because this is 2019's map. And I was looking at it and it does a couple things really well. One, in that map in 2019, when it envisioned, where's the growth going to happen in Waitsfield? It's Waitsfield Village and Irisville. Well, now Irisville is the new neighborhood development area. And when you see Warren on that, it's Warren down through that residential neighborhood south of the village, not just the village center. So that's one of the nice things about this new system is we have that flexibility. If those maps had been, if our maps come out looking a lot like that, which I would hope they would, you don't have to go through that process of applying for a designation. You're kind of already defaulted into it and you can use as much, you can put more energy into it or less energy, but now it's kind of through the region, through your, through this process. So it's closer to home is the idea.
And if I can share from my experience, before there was a neighborhood development area, the village centers served a lot of different purposes. And then they created the neighborhood development area, which is made to essentially fit around a
Yeah.
village center. And they changed the village center sort of benefits to being more kind of economic development and business related.
Yeah.
And as a result, in Warren specifically, it was a larger area. And then the program changed, they created the neighborhood development area and essentially they shrunk Warren's area because they said, well, it's just where the commercial establishments are. How many are there in Warren Village? Not so many, so right, so it got really, really small. So the idea of that time was that an NDA would come in and kind of fit around it. This is essentially an evolution of that thought.
That's right.
And I think it's absolutely going in the right direction.
Yeah, and this little design, as simplistic as it is you're gonna have your center, could be a village center, and Warren might still have a village center, and then any neighborhood areas would be around it. Where are we? Okay, similar matrix. What are the future land use areas and how do they flow into the designations now? Center and neighborhood. Oh, sorry, it's not a neighborhood, it's an area. My bad. Dock me a point on the test. So new designations based on regional plan map, land use review board will be up and approving these things. Starting 2026, as we update our map, towns will more or less have the benefits immediately applied. And finally, housing targets. This is the other new piece that will also flow down to each of all the municipalities statewide. Act 181, well, technically the Home Act of 2023, and then reinforced by Act 181 of 2024. Created both statewide and regional housing goals or targets. I want to be careful with the terminology of targets. It's an unfortunate term, and I think it gives kind of the wrong idea of what they are. So I want to talk about them a little bit. So based on the legislation, VHFA, Vermont Housing and Financing Authority, updated their housing assessment study and gave Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission or our planning area a lower target of 2,500 units and an upper end target of 3,800 units between now and 2030, and then a longer term target of 15,000 to 8,000 to 15,000 by 2050. It is then the task of the RPC to disaggregate those targets into, or those spans, those ranges into each of the municipalities. As I mentioned earlier, a majority of those new housing units need to be assigned to those big four, the village and town centers, food plan growth areas, and the village areas. So we're working on our future land use map. Then based on that future land use map, we're going to see how many houses we can pour into each town's kind of growth areas. And then what's left over would kind of be assigned to the rural areas. That's rural general, rural ag and working lands, and even rural conservation to a degree. if a town had a lot of rural conservation, that would be the kind of thing we'd steer housing away. So we're gonna try to take into account all the attributes on the land to develop those housing targets. They are targets, they are aspirational. I think the goal is to set the targets, try to figure out how far we make it toward them, and then ask the question, well, why do we do well in this town and not so well in that town? And try to start teasing out the causes for housing shortages, but also where there are successes, what's helping lead to those successes.
Question on that
Mhm.
graph. So does the 8,045 include the 2540 or
Yes.
is that in addition to?
Includes.
Okay.
And
So-
I think we're giving the choice, I'd have to go back and look, but I believe we have the choice if we want to set the targets for 5 years or 25 years. I'd have to talk to my planners. Right, so no penalties if we don't make the targets, but these are the estimates that BHFA has come up with. And I believe that's all I got. So I wanted to, there's a lot there. It kind of takes a while to understand how these three streams interact and align. And I'm happy to answer any questions today or any day in the future.
Can I start off with, so it sounds like we have to, towns
Mhm.
have to decide which tier to opt into
Mhm.
or.
Right, I don't,
Or stay in tier two if they're in tier two.
Yep.
And not do anything. When is the time frame for that? And seems like you guys are gonna come out and offer us advice, so.
we'll give you more advice and we'll do it in smaller groups and with a more concrete map in front of you.
Interruption, you folks have a key to lock up when you're done?
Yep.
Thank you. Good night.
So once we establish once we have an adopted regional future land use area map, then towns can opt in. There's no deadline if on, even I'd say, even once we issue our draft plan, a town could probably say, we want to opt in and we're gonna sign the thing and start showing our capacity to take this on. But it wouldn't become effective until we had an adopted plan. The rules for tier 1A, which are worth considering, you have to apply for tier 1A and it has to go through land use review board. We don't know what their criteria exactly are going to be for that. We'd imagine some of the the existing state permitting issues they look for under Act 250. I don't know. But to apply for that tier 1A, you need to be a tier 1B first anyway. I don't know if you have to be, but you will be a tier 1B because you probably would have opted into that. It's going to take longer to get the requirements set up for tier 1A.
So when do we have to start worrying about doing something?
Well, we'll come out and talk to you.
Okay.
And then you probably wanted to, we'll come out and talk to you and then you can, or if you wanted something to us to act faster, we can get someone out to a planning commission meeting sooner to talk to you about this. And so your planning commissions can start asking the question, well, do we have any tier 1Bs? Do we want to pursue this? What are the benefits? What are the downsides? If you want to start that conversation earlier, we'll help you start that conversation tomorrow if you want, but you'll be able to actually take action sometime early next year.
Does anyone else have questions for Christian?
I have a very dumb question, which is, I actually don't know what geographic area the CVRPC covers. Is it just
Mhm.
Washington County? Is it?
Pretty much,
Okay.
it's Washington County plus the 3 towns of Orange, Washington, and Williamstown that are in Orange County.
Okay.
We're 23 municipalities and our offices are in Montpelier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just curious because the housing targets overall are region wide. They're not, we're not expecting the valley to take 5,000 units of housing.
I think you guys are gonna, Montpelier's already said they have a goal of 1,500 units by in the next 20 years. So that gets us halfway to the lower end of one of those targets, which is good because we don't want it to seem like we're dumping on one town or another. And I think some towns, when we come back with the final numbers and we're saying, hey, you need 120 units in the next 5 years, are kind of be like, yeah, you and what army, right? And that'd be a massive increase in permanent year-round housing for most of our towns.
Yeah.
That no one's really seen in a long time.
I mean, Wastefield's looking at hoping for somewhere in the order of 70 to 80. If wastewater happens, you know,
Mhm.
when it happens. So I mean, yeah, I mean, hundreds is hard to imagine, but
Yeah.
needed, obviously, but I'm just curious, 'cause I didn't know. You know, without knowing what the bounds are, it's hard to sort of judge.
Yeah, no,
where
fair
it's gonna
enough.
land.
We did an initial analysis because we had to have something in our interim plan, and we just looked at existing growth trends and natural deterioration of housing, basically, and a healthy vacancy rate of 15%. Kind of took those three variables to try to figure it out for every town. And I would have guessed any of the towns in the valley would have come in around probably 40 units at the most over the next 5 years. However, when the VHFA targets, low end of the VHFA targets are double basically what we estimated on our own. So, you know, maybe it would be as high as 80, but again, once we put a majority of the housing into our downtowns and then our village centers, it's gonna be a small number, but we'll have that conversation.
And you said this is largely for the purpose of identifying obstacles to housing, is that?
Yes,
I know in the past, we've kind of.
we've had,
This hypothetical number.
this is your
and we're
quota,
like-
right?
We're like, sure, whatever.
Yeah, this is.
Okay, this is our quota, but, you know.
That's why I don't like the target term, because there's nothing really we can do to build houses. We're not in that business. But we need to show progress towards, so, you know, in one municipality, progress might be identifying what percentage of short-term rentals are existing and what methods exist to transition short-term rentals into year-round housing. And we're going to have a study to do that. And we believe that can start, that will help work us towards this target by indirectly creating these evolutions. To my mind, it's about showing you're thinking about the planning, not, we have 20 acres of land set aside and we're gonna put 200 units on it. I think it's planning, it's a planning number. It's all about thinking about what could happen, so, and how you might get there.
I mean, based on where my mind is at,
Mm-hmm.
when I think about housing and density, I think about infrastructure.
Yeah.
Right, so the
Mhm.
planning and the infrastructure piece. And hopefully there could be some things tied to that into the future, right? I mean, the
Right.
ability to have that level of density does require infrastructure and infrastructure investment and expansion within our communities.
Absolutely, and I think you look at the hard work that the Valley has done, or Waitsfield and its neighbors, what have done in developing the water system. I mean, you have to acknowledge that planning work that got you here to now you can really be having a serious conversation about those 70 units that you might be able to add to the system.
And maybe it's not appropriate at this particular time, it's just the way my brain works. I'd love to look at the housing target, the analysis work that was done and that
Mhm.
identified those numbers.
Mhm.
I assume that's available.
Yeah, that previous one, yeah, I mean, we can talk a little bit about methodology if you want to talk to some of the planners that we're looking at for this future.
Yeah.
So the new one, yeah, I mean, just the map some of you have in front of you, we'd be looking at the pink areas and figuring out how we put 50% of the local targets in those pink areas. So that we're not putting undue burden on our working landscapes and conservation areas.
Is that like a build out analysis?
It's not exactly, no. I don't think we will. I think because we're not really concerned about what the local zoning might be. You might say, well, you have this village and you're planning for growth, but your zoning is only, 2-acre minimums. We recommend you think of a smaller lot size, right? And then that would be the planning work you need to get to that goal that we've kind of said could fit in your village. Right, so it's not exactly a build out, it's more future looking than what's already on the ground.
I mean, we certainly don't, I think we appreciate that sort of analysis, but like, in Warren Village, we reduced lot size
Mhm.
from an acre to a quarter acre. We allowed commercial, combined commercial, mixed use. And nothing happened,
Yeah,
you know,
Yeah.
unfortunately. I
The
mean,
planning work happened,
Yeah, the planning work happened, but no one,
regulation.
not much,
Right.
development, if any, followed that,
right.
good planning. So I'm thinking that the major impediment here is cost.
Mhm.
And perhaps short-term rental plays some role to be determined, but let's, probably cost is the big,
Oh, yeah.
big
And
issue.
the value people ascribe to that open space that they might have a big backyard, right? You gotta overcome that as well.
Right.
People move to Vermont for a certain lifestyle.
Because of ski towns. Sorry, David.
Yeah, no, possible dumb question later as well. So the targets are kind of amorphous and aspirational. The combination of the designation and the tier leads to different treatment of different projects by right?
Mhm.
Is that right?
Mhm.
Okay. And then, is there any, and it seemed like the characteristics of kind of the community infrastructure and capacity of their staff, and their bylaws and
Mhm.
subdivision bylaws were the main factors in the tiers. Is there any, analysis of like economic data, like median home price to average, median salary or stuff like that, rents? Because, here it's just that is pretty impactful to people looking for work, especially.
Yeah,
Yeah,
not a,
people-
not a dumb question,
Yeah.
but, no, it's not taken into account in those. In either the tiers or the, future land use areas.
Any other questions for Christian? Thank you very much, Christian.
Happy to talk with anyone
Thank you.
as questions arise.
Many will.
Sure.
Next item on the agenda is the MRV Active Transportation Corridor update from Sam Robinson. Anyone like?
Let me just. You have to bump me out. It's not giving me my stop sharing. Oh, there we go. I found it.
Oh, Kristen, it might be, can you share that presentation with us?
Um,
Or if you're comfortable, or
yeah.
some version of it?
Yeah, I could,
At your convenience.
sure. Sorry, it's not, it really doesn't,
You're good.
you got me kicked out? No, oh, there we go, popped up. Found it. Wow.
Yeah, I have a copy of.
Yeah,
that
you do have a
already.
copy, yeah.
So Sam or I will send it out.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I shared the room. Right. So. Right, now I got everything configured the way it needed to be. Thanks everyone for letting me speak a little bit about the Matterhorn Valley Active Transportation Corridor project. This will just be kind of like a project update, considering we're getting towards the end of the scoping study. So just let you know what we've been working on in the past couple of months, kind of where we're at now and what you can expect in the next couple of months moving forward. Overall, it's been really awesome to work on this project. I think we've made a lot of good progress, and every public event we've had has been really well attended. We've had a lot of good feedback, and I think the project as a whole is moving along really nicely. Just in case someone watches this recording, I figured I'd do a little bit of background, but we'll definitely have some time for questions at the end. But I figured a good place to start would just be kind of the project's mission, the purpose, why we're doing this, and what it can offer to our residents, but also visitors to the Mad River Valley. So the ultimate goal of the Active Transportation Corridor is to connect the vital aspects of the place we live. Things like schools, village centers, recreational assets, and just provide accessible opportunities to be in nature, and also safe forms of active transportation to commute throughout the valley. It also does secondary things, but also very important things, bolstering our four-season economy, and lowering our reliance on things like fossil fuels. The project as proposed, so what exactly are we proposing? This
map here, it's hard to see, but this was the map we used for our application to V-Trans Transportation Alternatives Grant Program back in 2023. So what we've proposed is an active transportation corridor connecting Warren Village to, this map shows just outside of Middlesex Village, but currently we recently spoke with Middlesex, and now the corridor will actually extend all the way into Middlesex Village, so the Route 100B and Route 2 intersection. And there's a couple different opportunities or design scenarios that we've explored throughout the scoping study. So that's one part of what a scoping study is kind of understanding the opportunities and constraints and coming up with a few different design scenarios based upon those. But as you can see, looking at this map, a large argument for this project was the sheer number of recreational assets, villages, schools, and other important community aspects that this corridor would connect. The project background, we have a little bit of a timeline, kind of overarching timeline here. But an important piece of work to highlight is that this builds upon prior planning work, which is the Matterhorn Valley Moves Active Transportation Plan. It was a study in 2016 commissioned by the Matterhorn Valley Planning District. And the goal of the Matterhorn Valley Moves Active Transportation Plan was to create kind of a unified vision or plan for what active transportation could look like in the Matterhorn Valley. It involved an extensive public process, surveys, community engagement, and also looked at the recreational assets that we had at the time and tried to envision how could we connect these to, or take steps to connect these assets to improve transportation choices, enhance just overall quality of life, and also support future economic development. At the end of the project, there was a comprehensive plan to connect over 100 miles of public trails into one cohesive network. And one of the main opportunities identified throughout that study was a shared use path going along the valley floor within the Route 100 right-of-way, but separate from vehicle traffic. So that's exactly what the Matterhorn Valley Active Transportation Corridor aims to create. In 2023, so more recently, this project began to gain steam again with Misha Golfman from the Mad River Path. He began what he called the Coalition of Support, which was essentially reaching out to over 50 different community boards, both locally and regionally, to gauge their interest and also try and get their support to get behind this project. Around the fall of 2023, there was support from Warren, Waitsfield, Fayston, and Moortown to apply for a scoping study grant through Transportation Alternatives Program. And the Matterhorn Valley Planning District, Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission, and Mad River Path put in that application. And in the spring of 2024, we were notified that the $84,000 request was fully funded. So that kind of brings us to the present time. Last March, we learned that the application was funded. And around then, we began working with VHB, which is an engineering firm based in South Burlington, to assess the feasibility of this path and also identify what kind of constraints would we run into and ultimately come up with a preferred alternative moving into the design and construction funding. The more current timeline we have here, so you can see some of the things I talked about. The scoping study initiated in earnest last September. We did some initial work with VHB leading up to our first public meeting in November 2024, which was the local concerns meeting. That was an opportunity for residents to come voice concerns that they had about the project, voice things that they're really excited about, spur trails that they really would like to see, anything about the project that they wanted to be incorporated into the scoping process. That was the first opportunity for community members to come out and have their voice heard. Between November and March, Mad River Valley Planning District staff and Mad River Path staff did a lot of field assessment days. We went out, took utility pole measurements for VHB to kind of cut down on costs because it was such a long corridor that they didn't necessarily have it in their budget to do all the field work. We also spoke with landowners along the corridor to assess their interest in potentially maybe letting the path go on their property at certain points. Looked at slopes, looked at wetlands, all sorts of considerations. And VHB all the while was also digesting the information received from the local concerns meeting. Things like having a spur trail to Harwood and all the other feedback that, trail users, what kind of trail users would we like to see? So that was all incorporated into 3 different alternatives that were then presented in the next public meeting, which is highlighted in green there, the presentation of the alternatives. So at that meeting, VHB had 3 different design scenarios that they presented, which we have outlined here. So the first they called the minimum build scenario. So minimum build scenario would essentially be, I use Street Mix to try and come up with a visual for what it might look like. Essentially, it would be limited to some additional signage. There wouldn't be large scale construction improvements or improvements to like the existing roadway infrastructure. It would more or less be expanded signage and just making it clear that vehicles must share the road and provide safe passing distance to cyclists and pedestrians. The next kind of intermediate approach was an expanded shoulders approach. This would create widened shoulders, so there would be a dedicated bike lane for cyclists and pedestrians, but ultimately they still would be on the traveled lane where vehicles are, just with more room. And the last scenario was the shared use path scenario, which would include a 10-foot wide bidirectional side path, fully separated from vehicle traffic. So at the presentation of the alternatives meeting on March 26th, the scoping study team had a bunch of information in the form of posters, and VHB also gave a formal presentation that kind of outlined the opportunities and difficulties with each of these approaches, and also highlighted some areas where it would be really logistically difficult to accommodate, for instance, the shared use path, just based on steep retaining walls or ledge at kind of pinch points, or maybe bridges that aren't currently suited to have the full path, for instance. So they really laid out everything that they had discovered throughout the scoping study process. And then after having that formal presentation, participants at the meeting were asked to review 4 different maps that broke the whole corridor into 4 unique segments. And they had an overall path alignment. I'll show you one here. So here you can see this is the first segment that goes from Warren Village to kind of just into Waitsfield. So you can see the overall alignment, and based on the information provided in the presentation, what we asked the participants to do was vote on, for each segment of the 3 alternatives, what made the most sense to them. So for segment 1, would you support the minimum build scenario? Would you support the expanded shoulder scenario? Or would you prefer the shared use path scenario? So that was asked of each 4 segments, with the understanding that, if you vote shared use path for segment 1, reality will sometimes dictate places that might not be possible, understanding that that would be your preferred option, if that makes sense. So getting into the results from the presentation of the alternatives meeting, we had around 90 to 100 attendees at the meeting, and about 2/3 of the in-person attendees voted at each station, between 40 and 60 at each of the 4 map stations. We also had online voting. We created kind of like a digital experience. We also did that for the local concerns meeting. And the online voting for this meeting, or the online experience for this meeting, also had voting. So all in all, we received, you can see, between 60 and 70 votes at each station. And by and large, the community thought that the shared use path option was the ideal scenario out of the 3 that were presented. So between the 26th and yesterday, VHB had been kind of refining some of the maps that they'd come up with. I don't have those maps digitally, but I could get them and send them out to the group. But we had an advisory committee meeting yesterday, which the advisory committee is made up of representatives from all of the towns involved. So from Warren to Middlesex, both community members and municipal representatives. And VHB did another presentation for us based on the feedback and the voting from our last public meeting, they came up with certain recommendations for what they see as the preferred alignment. So kind of the ideal alignment at the end of the scoping study, moving into design and construction funding. They had a couple takeaways that they shared with us. Their proposal included a strategic mix of shared use path, existing off-road trails, and the expanded shoulders. They had a realistic view from an engineer's perspective of like what is actually possible given some of these real constraints. So there were considerable sections of, and feel free to chime in if you want, there's some, within the whole alignment, there were considerable portions of expanded shoulder in their proposal. They also outlined a phasing structure for us. So the first phase in alignment with kind of what we were thinking would be from Munn Field to Waitsfield Village, just so we can kind of catalyze on the movement with the wastewater project, since they'll be working in that area anyway, and then connecting Warren to Munn Field, where that first section would pick up, and then proceeding north from there to Middlesex. But at the end of this presentation, VHB emphasized that at the end of the day, we will consider their recommendations to us, but it's the community's choice and the advisory committee to either accept or reject some of these recommendations, with the understanding that if we were to be overzealous, then there's always a chance that V-Trans in their review could kind of send us back to the drawing board a little bit. That's kind of how I understood it.
Or the other way, if we're not zealous enough, and say, well, we could accept, expanded shoulders today, but an off-road path is somewhere we want to go in the future, we may not actually get there because we might settle too early. That was part of the discussion at the advisory committee
Yeah.
level.
So after the presentation with VHB, the advisory committee broke up into 4 different groups. So there was 1 group per section. And we talked about kind of what our priorities were, based on the feedback given by VHB. Did we agree with it? Do we not agree with it? And to be honest, we kind of ran out of time towards the end of this meeting. There was a lot of discussion. So the general consensus that I gathered from it, though, was the group was very much more in favor of vast majority being shared use path, kind of highlighting what Josh said, like we could always, it would be hard to ask for too little and then ask for more later. And also understanding that like a small pinch point where you might have to go on the road with cars will drastically reduce the likelihood. It'll cut down pretty drastically the pool of people that might be willing to travel on that section. I would say that was kind of my takeaway. I don't know if you have any additions.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about that there are some pinch points and barriers and ledge and bridges and things that serve as bottlenecks that can make a off-road shared use path a barrier, but also saying, well, if those are really the barriers to keep this longer stretch from happening, then let's double down and identify those and come up with strategies with them and work with V-Trans on that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was more the inclination of the group. Also, that inclination really furthers what we heard from the public at the meeting, which was, essentially y'all have been talking about a separated pathway, and there was a lot of community interest in that.
Yeah. So then just giving a bit of a understanding of the next steps. So the next couple milestones that we'll expect to see from this project would be the draft scoping study we expect in early May, which then the scoping study team and advisory committee will review, provide any feedback to VHB if needed. And also around mid-May, V-Trans will begin their review, which will take a couple weeks. And depending on the feedback we get back from V-Trans, we'll have to incorporate that in the study. But before we actually get the review back from V-Trans, mid to late May, we're hoping to get Waitsfield Select Board endorsement of the draft, with the understanding that if there are substantial changes, there might have to be another endorsement once the changes are made. But the reason that we're doing it this way is We're hoping that if all goes well, we'll have the draft scoping study in time to apply for segment one design and construction funding through the V-Trans Bike and Pedestrian grant program in late May. And then by mid-June, we hope to have the V-Trans review done, all the feedback incorporated, and then have the scoping study complete. And then from there, we would bring it to the rest of the select boards for their endorsement of the study. And then the remaining funding applications would be a while down the road since this will be such a long project, but that's kind of the next steps as far as the project's concerned. And that's pretty much all I have for you. I'm happy to talk more about anything, but that's kind of where we're at right now in the process.
Any questions for Sam? Thank you, Sam. Hearing none, we'll move on to the member roundtable. Let's start with Jim and go around this way.
Sure. We're open for another full week, midweek, till next weekend, and then we're going weekend to weekend. Our website says we close the weekend of the 30th, but we're planning on going to the Cinco de Mayo weekend, which is what we usually do. So that's the plan. We're holding up great. The weather really hasn't impacted us a bunch. We have started to cut some trees over at the Mount Ellen surface lift. We're in the got our Act 250 approved. We're in our 30-day waiting period or appeal period. So that's moving forward. We just applied for an Act 250 permit for the Claybrook stream augmentation, which has to do with a restriction that was put on us back in maybe even 2000 related to the Claybrook residential project and stream flow and our water department. So we've come up with a solution with state streams to augment the Claybrook, and hopefully that'll get approved and we'll have that wrapped up and constructed this summer. Other than that, I don't know, Joel, do you have anything on the mountain? We have a pretty busy summer period with weddings pretty much every weekend. There's a couple of empty ones I think there's one in July and one in August, but we're pretty straight through with that. We're gonna have our pig jig over at Mount Ellen. It was Memorial Day weekend last year. I think we're doing it a weekend before. I can't remember the date on that. But we are planning on taking advantage of Mount Ellen's deck through the summer like we did last year. I'm not sure what the night is. I believe it's either Tuesday or Wednesday night. Along with that, we had a meeting with the Waitsfield Facein Fire Department about 2 weeks ago to go over with the new chief and the department. The base lodge and the new Vermont Adaptive Edition and where to find keys, how to operate the sprinkler system. The modifications we made at the request of the prior chief to the fire system. So the fire department actually has access now to our 17,000 gallons of storage up on the hill for our sprinkler system. If the hydrants aren't active in the summer, so they have our snow main pond and the reserves out of the building to pull water. And that's something we typically do with the Warren Fire Department several times a year is we'll pick a building and we'll go through the fire systems, the elevators, where all the keys are, how to access, how to, effectively fight a fire in each one of our buildings. So that's about it from Sugar Bush.
Golf opens first weekend of May.
Same weekend as Cinco de Mayo.
Closing weekend.
Yeah, closing weekend.
Yeah.
So ski and golf.
Yeah.
That
Seasonal
weekend.
overlap.
Deck at Waltz, gonna rebuild the deck at Waltz.
We're not gonna do that. We do have, and we have designed a new building for up there. Currently, the septic system has the capacity for about 150 people, and if you've been up to Waltz, you can only put about 40 upstairs. So we have designed a building. We've worked with the engineers on all of that. Every year we put it in for growth capital. And if we were to get a new building, that would probably be the one that we'd be more.
Yeah.
And along with that would be, improved operating hours for Mount Eleanor days. So, and that's kind of hopefully the plan going forward. But right now, the building's somewhat of a tear down to sort of put on a $60,000 deck.
Yeah, it was stupid. That was a rumor, just wanted to.
It's a good place to.
Major construction projects, like last year was a very busy year.
Right,
Is there a lift replacement at Mount Ellen going on this year? Did I?
we're putting a surface lift in.
Service lift, okay.
Yeah.
We're submitting for replacing the North Ridge lift. And so if we get approved for that, that's about a year's worth of planning and a lot of dollars. And then that would start basically at the end of next season going through.
And last year, I think because of the construction, not that I'm a downhill mountain biker,
Mhm.
but downhill mountain biking was on pause. Is that gonna?
We are not going to have downhill mountain biking this summer.
Okay.
So,
Thank you. Any other questions for Jim? Or Joel? No? Hearing none, let's move on to PQ.
Oh, I'm going this way. We had a meeting of the Face and Planning Commission last Monday. This past Monday, that's the 14th. I was deposed. We had a reorganization and I have stepped down as chairman of the planning commission. And Langford Davidson is going to be the new chairman. Andrew McNeilis will remain vice chair. I think that's a really great thing. Langford is incredibly motivated, very active. He lives just right up the road from the town offices and pops in quite frequently to meet with Jason on all the issues and is highly motivated, and I think it's gonna be fantastic. We're like I said at the last update, we're looking forward to working on the town plan and working with CRB PD. Nick Sabato met with us 2 meetings ago, and things are moving along.
Thank you. Jonathan?
And not a ton to report for the first time in a while. We have had one debriefing session with our consultant post the public meeting. But I don't actually think there's that much to report from that because you all had a chance to, or most people here had a chance to see the results of that meeting on the posters that we brought last time. For anyone who didn't, those images should be up on the website pretty soon if they aren't already. But the main takeaway was essentially that the public that attended, much like the path, I think the public that attended our meeting similarly was very much in support of the sort of most extensive development, the most sort of aggressive goals. So that was a real good vote of confidence for the project ahead. And so that was at least my big takeaway. There was maybe a little bit more debate among what types of housing development, building development people would like to see, architectural styles, whether, limitations to be imposed on certain types of things. People don't seem to like the sort of boxy 3-story mixed use in this area. But other than that, I think we got a pretty monolithic sentiment towards, try to go for as much as we can, try to get as much housing as we can. Everyone seems to really appreciate the need. So that was the big takeaway. Now we're just pushing forward to get to the end of the project, put together the deliverable and close it out, and then consider taking a second stab. There's you can be eligible for 2 of these grants for master planning, sort of contiguous. So we may, after doing this project, we know there's some concerns around wetlands, there's concerns around a few other sort of more nitty-gritty aspects of what we've been reviewing. So we're going to be regrouping and deciding if it makes sense to sort of narrow down the scope and get a second, look for a second grant to go after some of the more specific areas that might help us to target some of our planning efforts. But yeah, so I imagine I'll have more to say in the future, but for now, that's kind of the big thing.
Thank you, Jonathan. Chuck?
Yeah, just I'll share with you again, essentially what I did at the last meeting. We're still looking for a summer road crew member. And that position could turn into a full-time position for the right person. So if you know of anybody who's looking for that kind of work, we're still looking for that kind of person. And then, we're still looking for an assistant town clerk, which is a part-time position. And, so if anybody knows of anyone interested in that kind of work, we have a position available for that as well. Other than that, we're still working with FEMA on a weekly basis to try to recoup some of the funds that we've spent. We haven't got any projects that are 100% complete yet, because winter came and we were focused on plowing and all the other things. So now we gotta go back and line ditches and do all that other good stuff that needs to be done before our jobs are 100% complete. So we're still working on that stuff as well. So that's it.
Thank you. Dave, did you have a chance to introduce yourself to the members?
No.
Would you, if you want to, in addition to an update, if you have an update for us, could you just tell us, just spend a minute or two, tell us about yourself?
Yeah, sure.
What you do?
Dave Babbitt Klein, moved here in 2020 with my wife and 2 kids. I'm a lawyer by trade, although not practicing anymore. And before that, I worked at a big bank. It's sad. Yeah, I'm thrilled to be here and to be serving on the Woodsfield Select Board. Pretty quiet update. April has been, well, we thought we had quorum for our meeting last week, but we had to cancel it because of personal circumstances of one of our select board members, and so we have a special meeting scheduled for the 25th. We've got some good paving about to start, East Warren Road and Slow Road. And we're also looking for a full-time road crew. You spoke first. But yeah, I look forward to getting to know everyone, and thanks.
Thanks, Ted. Welcome. Let's see, from the Warren PC, it's been pretty busy, I will say. We have, nothing on the scale of Waitsfield going on, but lots of little things. Got a grant application in for a planning grant. Monday night, we voted to pass our land use and development after an extremely, I mean, we're in year 6. And after an extremely contentious and confrontational period, culminating in our select board rejecting our land use development regs 3 years ago. No members of the public showed up to our planning commission meeting, and we voted, I mean, I think people are just fed up. I mean, the issues have been litigated, the controversial issues have been litigated and relitigated, and thank goodness we've now voted them to the select board, and the select board is now has familiarized themselves with great depth with the land use and development regs. So fingers crossed those move forward. We're about to start the town plan. I think we're going to be working with CDRPC for assistance in our town plan. You know, the Warren Town Garage bond vote is coming up quickly, so we're trying to work on, it's really a select board project, but the planning commission is trying to throw its weight behind, you know, help the select board in kind of emulating Waitsfield and getting a communication strategy out and explaining to the public why it's a really good idea to get the town garage out of the center of the village, away from our elementary school and to a much better location. That's my update. Any other comments?
Christian?
Christian?
Sure,
Oh,
I feel like
sorry,
I spoke a lot.
Oh, no.
I'm ex officio, I get it.
I was like, Christian spoke. My mistake. Please, Christian. I'm
Sure,
sorry.
I'll keep it brief anyway, you know, at the regional level, give you that perspective. You know, disaster recovery, resilience projects are still a big part of our day-to-day work. The hazard mitigation grant program is, those applications are going in from Montpelier and Barry, you know, going after some big marquee dollars, for big projects that might really help the resiliency of some of our regional cities. looking at the legislature and trying to keep our eye on. If last year was all about getting sort of this planning work and this land use thinking into statute, this year the talk seems to be a lot about utilities, water, wastewater, and how do we get the services in place to support the housing. So that might be something that interests this area, and certainly as we hear stuff, we'll convey it on to Josh and all our municipalities. And our regional plan, we gotta write it. They don't write themselves.
AI.
Yeah, we've tried.
Any more, Kristen? A1. Anyone else? Okay, well, that was the last item on our agenda. Our upcoming meeting is May 15th, 2025. I think everyone has it on their calendars. And with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Do we have a second? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
The meeting is adjourned.
Nice.
Thank you.